They looked after our heroes. Paul Mashatile salutes African nations for welcoming South Africans fleeing apartheid. As South Africa celebrates Heritage Day on Tuesday, Acting President Paul Mashatile has paid tributes to several fellow African countries that opened their doors for South African activists and freedom fighters fleeing the brutal apartheid regime. Mashatile was giving his keynote address at the Meqheleng Stadium in Ficksburg, Free State, at the national annual celebrations which were attended by thousands of community members. During Heritage Month, we remember those who fought for freedom. Many of our freedom fighters died in Zimbabwe and Zambia, and others were killed in this country. Some of them, their families have never been able to identify their graves. They just disappeared, so we need to celebrate all these heroes, said Mashatile. As our heroes come back for the reburial at home, let me take this opportunity to thank more sincerely the people of Zambia, Zimbabwe, Angola, Tanzania, Mozambique, Lesotho, Botswana, and many other countries that welcomed our brothers and sisters. They looked after them. They even looked after our fallen heroes. Siyabonga, Riyaleboha. No words can be enough to thank you, the people of these countries, he said to ululation from the crowd. IOA reported on Monday that the government, represented by Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Gayton Mackenzie, and Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, INJIBS, will on Wednesday receive the remains of 49 former liberation fighters who passed away in exile in Zimbabwe and Zambia. The remains of the activists and freedom fighters are set to arrive at Waterkloof Air Force Base in Tshwane on Wednesday. Following the arrival of the mortal remains, government will host an official homecoming ceremony on Friday at Freedom Park, also Tshwane, to mark the return of the mortal remains of liberation fighters to their country of their birth. A homecoming ceremony will be taking place this Friday, September 27, 2024, in which President Cyril Ramaphosa will officially receive the repatriated remains from Zambia and Zimbabwe, said Mashatile. Among the remains to be repatriated to South Africa are those of struggle stalwarts Advocate Duma Nokwe, Mama Florence Moposho, and Purcell February. Mashatile said 3 decades into democracy, South African communities continue to grapple with challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. To tackle these ongoing challenges, we must unite. We must unite and celebrate our diversity while striving to create a more equal society where opportunities are not determined by the color of your skin, gender, class, or religion, but as a South African. Let us unite and build this nation for our people to get jobs, he said. The event on Tuesday was attended by senior government officials including Minister Mackenzie and Free State MEC for Sports, Arts and Culture and Recreation, Ntombizanele Sifuba, who were program directors, Premier of Free State, Maqueen Letoha Matai, Executive Mayor of Thabo Mafutanyane District Municipality, Konim Sibi, Mayor of Setsoto Local Municipality, Sebati Mbiwe, and several traditional and religious leaders. Mashatile said the significant celebration of Heritage Day happens as some communities in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape and Free State were negatively impacted by severe weather conditions exacerbated by climate change. In celebrating our heritage, we must be alive to the impact of climate change on not only our well-being, but also on our culture. Extreme weather conditions such as those witnessed over the past few days affect some of our cultural and heritage sites, therefore undermining our national goals to protect and preserve our culture for generations to come, he said. We emphasize with those who were affected by the widespread extreme weather. We would also like to commend Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and government departments for their prompt and robust multi-sectoral response. Additionally, we commend the provinces that were impacted for their prompt activation of their disaster response structures. He said response teams led by security structures and T-joints remains on standby to respond to any eventualities and continue to assist affected communities. Even while the teams are committed to helping and saving those in need, we nonetheless ask that our people exercise caution and pay close attention to any warnings issued by the South African Weather Service, said Mashatile. These meteorological conditions emphasize even more how important it is to increase our investments in technology that may improve weather predictions. The Heritage Day commemorations this year being held under the theme celebrating the lives of our heroes and heroines who laid down their lives for our freedom. Mashatile said the theme was befitting as it allowed South Africa to honor the lives of those who confronted adversity with unflinching bravery and stood up against justice and oppression, and finally gave their lives so that you and I can enjoy the fruits of democracy. In the meantime, many changes are needed to get nation working. The Department of Labor was eventually reconfigured into the Department of Employment and Labor. This was after a long and tedious discussion that first started from the draft discussion paper in October 2019. Eventually, in May 2023, the government's Technical Advisory Center was appointed to analyze it in order to understand its ability, implement the employment mandate optimally, and help implement the restructuring of the Departments of Employment and Labor. The reasons behind this was the fact that unemployment had become one of the most destructive issues faced by the government. The Advisory Center completed its analysis and presented it to the department in November 2023. Employment creation and its functions were to be moved to the top of the agenda. Many observations were made about service delivery, organizational structure, financial resources, ICT systems, and governance. Much talking and many reports flowed like water under the bridge. Many flow charts and reports were generated. Much hot air and fanfare followed. Experts and academics worked hours to produce hundreds of pages of theory. Despite all this, the government seemed to labor under the misconception that it must be at the center of job creation. Throughout the world over the past 30 years, we have seen a move away from governments creating jobs towards governments creating the environment for the private sector to create jobs. Unfortunately, in 2023 and the beginning stage of 2024, the government still believes employment equity and negative and onerous regulatory systems are needed. A large amount of money has been spent on entities known as the Public Employment Services and even Department of Employment and Labor Administration. We still have a severe delivery model built on the old style of government. The top-down approach doesn't work, and many thousands of South Africans can tell us how the Department of Employment and Labor has failed them. The Labor Policy Industrial Relations Program of the department has to analyze and report on the labor market trends annually, and research reports develop in the impact of labor legislation on the labor market. The program is vital and needs to be given adequate resources to fulfill the mandate. My understanding is that NEDLAC, which is the debating chamber for labor policy, has made various proposals about amendments to our labor laws. Hopefully, the proposals will see the way forward to follow up on the expanded mandate of empowerment policy. Over the past few years, President Cyril Ramaphosa has made a heartfelt plea for his ministers to analyze their laws and regulations to ascertain which ones stand in the way of job creation. The newly structured Development of Employment and Labor holds the final mandate to ensure that the government is creating an environment to assist the private sector to create jobs. We are all aware that the Unemployment Insurance Fund and the Compensation Fund are not performing and have issues relating to service delivery. The two entities are juristic creatures of the statute in that they have powers conferred upon them by the enabling legislation. The entities and their borders should be advising the Minister of Employment and Labor on the amendments to legislation. Both of them are Scheduled 3A entities and should be moved from the Director General of the Department to a board. The funds should be capacitated into more traditional 3A public entities with appropriate governance and accountability. There is a requirement for legislative amendments to create a formal board as accounting authority, own fund staff complement and associated ICT and other infrastructure arrangements. We need to also recognize that Productivity South Africa should not be undertaking employment section itself but should look at the structuring of its function to help the business community. It is recommended that Productivity SA downgrades many of its functions and restructures itself to be able to advise small businesses on how to not just survive but thrive. Likewise, Public Employment Services, which is an entity within the department, needs an urgent restructuring and redesign. The outputs are not in any way aligned with the needs of the economy. We don't have enough inspectors or enough oversight over the business community, thereby failing the employees of South Africa. One of the most disastrous areas of the department is the computer systems, and that, in particular, the SAP implementation has been extremely slow, expensive, and not delivered. The department has spent almost 1 billion rand over the past few years of computerization and has little value to show for it. At least now it is recognized and understood. This recognition means that we are on the road to stabilization. Much of the work done by the department should be unbundling, moving from the public sector to the private sector. This will, however, mean staff reducing and retraining, but it is about time. And that's it from INJIBS Network. Stay tuned to our celebrities and gossip news.